Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Bill Holter. Bill is a financial writer and a gold expert. Bill also helps individuals purchase and store precious metals. He collaborates with Jim Sinclair on jsmindset.com, and I am very happy to have Bill back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Bill, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Thanks for having me back, Dave.
Hey, thanks for being here. And I wanted to just start off. I mean, it's all over the news. They're having discussions now about Barr in contempt. We know that the Mueller report came out and basically there was no collusion, no obstruction. The AG gave the entire report, even the less redacted part of the report. But the Dems, they didn't go and read it. Only a couple people read it. Why won't they just let this go? I mean, the report came out. They already discussed the findings, but they keep pushing and pushing. They're never satisfied with any of this. Why do you think they're pushing so hard?
Well, they have to try to stay on offense. And the reason they have to do that is because the crimes were committed. Just look at how it all started with the Steele report, the FISA warrants. There were massive crimes committed. So they have to stay on offense so that they don't go on defense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think, well, personally, I think they're on defense now because,
right.
They're trying to stop everything. And what's very interesting about all this is that they're not going back to the original part of how this all started.
Exactly.
And it started illegally, but they don't want to know about that.
No. And they've got to, I guess to save face, they have to stay on offense because for the last 2 years, basically, the left and mainstream media outright lied over and over and over again. So they have to stay on offense to try to save face.
Since they've been telling us about Russian collusion and they've been telling us about how much evidence there is over the last 2 years, where do you think their credibility is right now? I mean, we have those individuals in government that have been telling us and the mainstream media putting report after report. Where do you think their credibility level is with the American people right now?
It depends on who you're talking about. I think the average person understands there was no collusion. This whole thing was made up. And then you've got non-thinking leftards that want to believe, they're going to believe whatever they want to believe. And they want to believe that Donald Trump is Satan.
Since he came into office, they've been trying to get his tax returns and they've been pushing and pushing. And it looks like the New York Times got his tax returns from 1985 to 94. And what's very funny is that Hillary was out there saying that, maybe the Chinese can get the tax returns. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
It's very interesting that all of a sudden they got 10 years of tax returns. What does this really tell anyone, though?
Well, it doesn't tell anybody really anything other than he was a real estate developer. And the way the tax laws were at that time, there was accelerated depreciation on all sorts of real estate. So your average real estate developer could be making tons of money, but actually show a loss. And that's what Trump did.
So really, these returns are absolutely just meaningless. They're just putting it out there for propaganda purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, actually, during this period, wasn't there a real estate crash during this period also?
Yeah, there was, after the 87 crash on the East Coast, in 89, 90, 91, there was a real estate got real soft. On the West Coast, it got soft. And of course, before that, in 84, 5, 6, in Texas, there was a real estate crash.
Yeah, so if you factor that into everything, and to me, this shows absolutely nothing, and there's nothing to it. I think this is just going to die off.
Well, Dave, none of it is even a function of strong or soft real estate prices. It's all a function of accounting. It's a function of how do you account for depreciation. I mean, that's got to be the biggest factor affecting a real estate guy's tax return.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to use this to say that, he's not as wealthy as he says he is. And I think they're trying to use this to try to push that point.
Well, and, that's fine. And that very well may be true. I mean, years ago, I can't remember, it was 15, 20 years ago when Forbes did their one of, I think, one or two people that argued, oh, you have my net worth too low. So maybe his net worth is not as high as it's perceived or how he portrays it. But who cares? I mean, okay, so he's not worth 3 or 4 billion. Maybe he's only worth $1.5 billion or $2 billion. I mean, it doesn't. None of it even matters.
No, it doesn't. I wanted to ask you, Trump is out there and he tweets out a lot, and he's on Fox, and he continually says, the D-class is coming very soon. Very soon. I mean, I know last year he put out the statement which went to the Justice Department. Why do you think he's holding back on releasing the D-class?
Well, at this point, I have no idea. Up until the Mueller report was released, it could be said that, he wanted to see what was in that, how it came out. And of course, he could have released it before the election, the midterm election last year. But had he done that, then you would have you'd have the left saying that he, threw the entire election personally.
If what you're saying is true about the midterm election, I guess he's not going to release it right before the 2020 election then, because won't they say the same exact thing?
Yeah, they'll say the same exact thing. But I mean, this coming election obviously is more important because it's for the next 4 years of a presidency. It's the second, his second term if he wins. The bottom line is, if there's no D-class, if there's no arrests, there's no rule of law, and thus there's no country. It's over.
Last time you were on, you were saying, there were no arrests, and still here we are today. There's still no arrests. We know there's a lot of sealed indictments. We know that Barr is investigating. We know a lot of information has come out. Is Trump and his administration, are they preparing the United States, the people, to continually hear this so they're used to hearing that there was something going on in the background to try to bring them all up to speed?
I really don't know. I can tell you my patience is wearing thin because it's so obvious in so many different instances that crimes were committed. And it goes all the way to the top. It goes to Hillary. It goes to leaking stuff from the CIA. I mean, you have outright treason. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, look at Uranium One. Who was it that brought the uranium sample? It was Mueller himself. So I mean, the investigators have to be investigated, and investigating them is so easy because it's already literally publicly known the traitorous and treasonous acts that these people have already committed.
Let's turn to the economy. Right now, the stock market is, soaring. I know it's dipped down a little bit. Unemployment numbers have come down again. GDP numbers look fantastic. I mean, we know that a lot of this is manipulated. We talked about this before. And we know that most likely Trump is pushing the manipulation for the next election because, I mean, we can all agree on that. We might be Republicans, we might be Democrats, we might have opposite sides and many different things, but everyone agrees on money. We all agree, jobs, money, we all want that. And it seems to me that he's pushing this to use this in the 2020 elections because everyone that's going up against him, what are they going to say? I can make the economy a lot better than you did. I can make the numbers go up. It wouldn't make sense. When looking at these numbers, what is the real state of the economy?
Well, the real state of the economy is correctly portrayed by John Williams. John Williams does the numbers the way the numbers were done 20, 30, 40 years ago before they started monkeying around with the inflation numbers, the unemployment numbers, GDP. If you look at just the last quarter, supposedly consumption was up, yet you've got all kinds of retailers closing. You have just announced, I think it was Monday, that the credit card charge-offs are jumping dramatically. In the last GDP report, it showed a massive increase in inventory. So things don't add up within the report. How could there be a jump in consumption and inventories pile up at the same time? That doesn't make sense. And if you look at industrial production, we're still not to levels that we had back in 2007, 2008. Industrial production has never recovered to eclipse what we were doing 10 years ago.
So what you're saying, from what I hear you're saying, is that the statistical numbers, like unemployment, stock market, they're not telling the whole story of what the economy is really doing.
Well, they're bogus. The reported numbers are bogus. I mean, like I said, look to John Williams to see what the real numbers are. And you've got stock markets levitated because you have central banks that have been buying stocks and holding them on their balance sheet. So in essence, you have stocks now backing currencies.
During this period when Trump first came into office, and actually a little bit before, the Fed was raising rates during this same time. And they kept raising the rates. They raised the rates, and Trump came out and he contradicted the Fed, saying, listen, don't raise the rates. Don't raise them. You're hurting the stock market. You're hurting this.
Well, he's talking his book. He wants them to print and pump the system up at least through to the election so that he can get reelected.
So do you think that he's actually then controlling the Fed and what they're doing?
Controlling the Fed, I don't know. That's above my pay grade. I think he's jawboning, obviously, but no, I don't think he's outright controlling the Fed.
Well, now he's telling the Fed to cut rates. Do you think they're going to actually end up cutting rates and actually pushing stimulus?
Yeah, I do. I think they're going to have to. They're going to be forced to by the markets, not by Donald Trump or by anyone else. I mean, once you see the credit edifice start to implode, and that's going to affect stocks. It's already affected real estate. You can see real estate rolling over, especially on both coasts. The higher priced real estate is rolling over. I think what happens in markets is going to force the Fed to push rates all the way back down to zero. They're probably going to try negative interest rates. It's not going to work. I mean, we've talked about this for. This is like a snake eating its own tail. It doesn't work. And Dave, if the economy was so good, all from 2008, 2009 on to present time, why has the Federal Reserve had to continue with emergency measures for 10 years? And the answer is because we're still in an emergency. The markets, the economy, nothing can stand on its own without ultra low, falsely low interest rates and liquidity pumped into the system. It's not self-sustaining is what the problem is.
The debt load and everything else across, not just here in the United States, but across the globe.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it can't be sustained. From what we've been talking about, Trump is trying to win the 2020 election, which we know.
Yes.
I mean, and he's using all the tools he has right now to show the economy is doing fantastically.
All the tools in the old playbook.
Yes,
The problem is there's almost no tools left at all. So, I mean, this is from my point of view, from where I see it, this is not about Trump getting reelected. This is about there's too much debt in the system and there's no tools that can fix that. It's mathematically an unfixable problem.
Do you think Trump knows this, that it can't be?
Of course he does. Of course he does.
Now, I mean, do you think the economy will last long enough to the 2020 elections?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
All I'll tell you is the markets should have collapsed 2 or 3 years ago. So can it go another year from now? I don't know.
A while back, we talked about how, if Clinton was elected, we'd be in a war. There'd be, things happening. Now
you and I would be in jail right now, Dave.
Say that again?
You and I would be in jail right now.
Yeah, probably. But the point I'm getting to is that since Trump is using, all their tools against them and approaching the election period of time, isn't the central bank now completely exposed? Because they don't have the event. They don't have anything to cover this up. They're the ones who are going to be on the hook when things go down.
With the caveat of the word yet. They don't have anything to cover it up with yet.
I mean,
let's see what happens. Do we get into a conflict with Iran? I mean, what happens down in Venezuela? Are China and Russia going to pack up and go away? I don't think so. What about the South Sea, where we just passed through two destroyers? I mean, who knows what's going to happen from an event side? But you're right. If the markets were to just turn from here, go down and implode, then yeah, they'd be naked. They wouldn't have anything to point at. But you could pretty much bet there's, 100 different potential false flags out there, and probably many, many more than we can even imagine or have ever thought about. But there will be some type of event that they'll be able to point at and say, our policies were working, but they didn't work because of this.
Do you think it's possible that Trump could restructure the Fed? I mean, he has two seats open. I know Kane is out of the picture. Moore is out of the picture. They were both gold bugs, and they were looking at different, scenarios than the people that are in there. People did resign in the Fed. So this seems like this is once in a lifetime chance to try to restructure or do something with the Fed.
It'd be like the same thing if they had the technology back during the day of the Titanic. If they had brought a whole new crew onto the Titanic, would it still have sunk? Yes. I mean, there's nothing they can't restructure the Fed. The only thing they can do is a reset in order to create fail. And the Fed is part of the old system.
But when we enter this crisis, at that point, I mean, I know there's different bills that are in the House right now. Tom Massey put, the audit the Fed. I know Rand Paul wants to audit the Fed. I know Trump, if you go back to his tweets, he wants some type of gold standard. He wants some type of audit of the Fed. If there is a crisis, he could use this for a way to actually go ahead and audit the Fed at this point. Because back in 2008, we saw the opposite happen, where it wasn't blamed on the Fed. It was, okay, let's bail out these companies. Let's do this. Let's scare the people. Let's scare government. The crisis this time can be used the opposite way, to actually look into the Fed, to audit the Fed, to see what the Fed has been doing, and then maybe say, listen, they've been dealing in illegal things, criminal things. Maybe we don't have to have this debt anymore. Maybe we can get rid of it because they've done things illegally.
Yeah, that would be a wonderful scenario, but I don't think it's going to be a wonderful scenario. I mean, you audit the Fed. If you truly audited the Fed and you truly audited Fort Knox, what would you find out? We're broke. I mean, do you really want the truth from an audit of the Fed? Do you really? I'm going to say, yeah, I'd love to see it. I'd love.
Well,
to
how
see
do you do the reset then?
The reset. What happens is gold. Gold is the only asset held by central banks that can be marked up enough to fill the black holes of zero that have been created by derivatives, losses on credits, etc. So the only way to reset, during a reset, you have to come out with you've got to come out with new currencies.
Right.
Okay. So the old currencies get zeroed out, washed away, converted. So you got the reset with the currencies, but they've got to be reset against something. And that something that they reset against is not going to be dollars. It's going to be gold. And like I said, gold is the only asset that central banks own that if gold is marked up to 10,000, 50,000, you pick a number, if gold is marked up, then it makes these central banks solvent again. They're not solvent.
Haven't the central banks been accumulating a lot of gold lately?
Yeah, we know. Well, we know for a fact that Russia and China have been accumulating gold, and yes, other central banks have on net. I think last year they bought, I don't know, 250, 260 tons, something like that.
So how about the United States? Has the United States been purchasing any gold, or the Fed purchasing any gold?
Literally since 1971.
Right.
There's been no gold outflow and no gold inflow. So the gold just sat there, supposedly.
On I think it was Fox at West Point, they went into the vault there to show the gold. So is that real gold in there, or what was it? I don't know.
Was it really West Point? I mean, I didn't see it, but my question is, I've got all those questions. Is it real gold? Is it tungsten? Is it U.S. gold? Whose gold is it?
If you're saying that to have this reset, gold is going to have to go up. But if the United States has no gold, what do we do?
Well, one of the things, the U.S. does have gold, but the gold is in the ground.
Where? Like, what do you mean in the ground? Like where?
In Nevada, in California, in where mines are located. Okay. We do have gold in the ground. So do other countries.
Is there enough there?
It depends on the price.
Okay. So you're saying that
what you price gold at. If you price gold at $1,300 an ounce, there is not enough gold on the planet to pay off 1% of the debt or some number like that. If you mark gold up 50-fold or 100-fold, yeah, you could cover the debt.
So you're saying that we do have gold, but it's in the ground, and that could be our safety net.
Well, yeah, you could have a national project. It would also include there is the potential that you see mines in the U.S. get nationalized for a national project of refilling the treasury. That's a possibility.
So if we use the gold, would that destroy the Fed then?
What would there if we were on a pure gold standard?
Yeah.
Which would be very difficult today because of the speed that people want to go into a store and swipe a card or whatever. A gold standard from that standpoint is impractical. What you would more than likely see is that countries would say, okay, we have and we can verify that there's X amount of gold. And that would stand as backing, so to speak, to their currency. In other words, it would act as a confidence builder. Okay, this country has gold and that country doesn't have gold. Which country's currency do you want to use? You want to use the one that has gold.
Right. So
I don't think there's any way we could go to an outright gold standard, but I do believe that gold held by central banks will be a form of or a display of financial power, if you will, to create confidence that nation is a fiscally or financially sound nation. So
would that mean that like governments couldn't borrow like they do today because they just go to the Fed and they say, listen, we need another $1 trillion. Let's vote. We need $1 trillion. They go to the Fed. The Fed, gives them the $1 trillion. We give them treasuries. If we had gold, would that stop that?
It should. But I mean, in today's world, go back to, what was it, 2010, we found out that the Federal Reserve had lent out without saying anything in a clandestine manner. They lent out $16 trillion. Now compare that to TARP of what was it, $700 billion that people were going wild about. And yet the Fed they went out and they lent 20 times that amount.
But the point,
in a perfect world, if gold were to directly back but not be convertible, it can't be convertible because if it is, everyone would convert and then the central banks would end up with no gold. But in a perfect world where currencies or central banks have gold, X amount of gold to back X amount of currency, you don't even need a central bank. You wouldn't need a Federal Reserve. I mean, yes, you would have booms and busts, but you would not have a controlled economy. You wouldn't have controlled markets. The marketplace, Mother Nature, would act to raise and lower interest rates based on supply and demand.
So if we have this gold as a confidence builder, will we still have the Federal Reserve note? Would the Fed still create the currency?
In a reset, I don't think it's going to stay as a Federal Reserve note. I think you're more than likely you will get another currency. Who knows what it's going to be called? It may be, it'll be issued directly by the Treasury.
And what happens to all those people that have the Federal Reserve note in the bank? So let's say someone has, 20,000.
It's just like any other currency that went away in the past. What happens is you go to your bank and you convert it. You convert it to the new currency at whatever the conversion rate is decided at upon the end of one currency and the beginning of another.
But people, I don't think it's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio.
No, of course not.
Yeah,
it might only be, it might be $10 to one new currency. It might be 100. It could be 1,000. Who knows?
And do you think this is where we're headed? Do you think this is what eventually is going to happen?
Well, yeah. Mathematically, we are headed toward a credit/currency crisis. The reason there's a slash there between credit and currency is they're pretty much interchangeable. Dollars and treasury notes are basically interchangeable. Treasury notes are no different than dollars, except they carry an interest that they promise more dollars. So if you understand that all fiat currencies are debt-based, when the debt system comes down, so will the currency system. In the past, when we had gold standards around the world, when credit collapsed, the price of gold would go up, the price of money would go up. Whereas during where we are now with a fiat regime all over the world, as credit collapses, so do the currencies. And there's your hyperinflation. It's a monetary event. It's not an event where people start going out and buying stuff. It's a function of fear trying to get out of the currencies.
Is there any way, we talked about this right in the beginning, that Trump knows, the system, he knows what's happening. Is there any way to minimize this so that the everyday person, it's not a Mad Max type of scenario?
I don't know of one. I do know from a personal standpoint, the way to alleviate the pain is to own physical gold and physical silver.
So if everyone in this country would own gold or silver, they could protect themselves from what is coming.
Yeah, but if everyone in this country, if everyone in the world owned gold and silver, you'd be looking at prices that are, in current terms, totally unrecognizable.
What do you mean by that, unrecognizable?
Well, let's say that 300 million Americans went out and bought an ounce of gold. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the math is on that. What's that, 10,000 tons? Yeah. That's 4 years of global production. What would that do to the price of gold? Would you be able to find any gold? Does the gold even exist for everybody to go out and buy 1 ounce?
So, instead of having every single person have gold, what happens if...
Gold and silver markets.
The silver.
Say again with silver?
What happens if everyone doesn't own gold and people own silver and the government owns gold? Since we said it's in the ground and they start bringing it up and they're using it, can this minimize the collapse of the Federal Reserve debt note?
No. The current system has to go down in order to create and foster a new system. You can't just shift gears and make a turn. Mm-hmm. Shifting gears and makes a turn effectively, like what you're talking about, destroys the system. It destroys the past system. How are all the past debts dealt with? How does the debt get paid?
Well, that brings me back to my original thought is if you show the Fed through an audit showing that they're a criminal enterprise, you don't have to pay for the debt because they did everything out of their mandate.
Let's assume that that's correct. Mm-hmm. What you're forgetting is that the debt that you owe on your house or your car or whatever is someone else's asset. It's an asset in someone's pension or in someone's portfolio or at someone's bank. It's an asset. And if all of a sudden you write that down to zero, what did you do? You just imploded the financial system. There's two sides there's debt and credit. There's creditors and debtors. And if you wipe out the debt, then you're wiping out assets.
So even with gold, let's say the government had all the gold in Fort Knox, the government had all the gold at West Point, and we had enough gold. By bringing down the system and having the gold in place, that wouldn't change anything.
If we had the gold in place, yeah, if we had the gold in place, if we truly do have 8,300 tons or whatever they say they have, well, yeah, that gold could be marked up to a number. I don't know what the number is, but it's big. It could be marked up, and yeah, it could cover all the debt issued since day one of this country. So it all has to do with A, do we have the gold, and B, at what price does all the debt get covered?
So no matter what, we're going to be going through this transition period.
Yeah, and it's not going to be pleasant.
Yeah,
no matter how much you've prepared ahead of time, it's not going to be pleasant.
I guess it's the opposite of what happened when we came off the gold standard in 71. I mean, we saw gas lines, we saw high unemployment, but this time, and there was very little bit of debt. Now,
but there was a different. You nailed it right there. There was very little debt. We were able to lever up, and that's what we did. We levered up through the 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way to current day. The system completely levered up to the point where there's no collateral left to lever.
So what should people do right now? If we know this day is coming, what should people do to protect themselves? I mean, say they've already purchased gold and silver. Is that all they have to do?
Well, gold and silver is not the first thing that you do. The first thing you do is you make sure that if you had to live on your own for 3 months, 6 months, I don't know what the time frame is, but if you had to live on your own, you'd have food, you'd have water, you'd have a way to generate, not full electricity for your house, but electricity to get things done. And from a financial standpoint, yeah, you want to own gold and silver. Gold is to carry your big wealth from this system to the next system, and silver will do the same, but you'll also be able to barter with it. Now, so this is not just go out and buy gold and silver.
Right.
This is prepare yourself. Where do you live? Do you live in a city? If you live in a city, you're nuts, because you got whatever the population is. Say it's a city of 1 million people. You got 1 million people that are hungry in close proximity. Only bad things can happen. But if you live out in the country, you can hunt, you can fish, you can shoot people as they come to your property. I mean, it makes no sense to live in a city. A city is a death trap in this scenario.
Bill, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
You can go to www.jsmineset.com.
I'll be putting a link at the bottom of the video, make it a lot easier for people to just click on it to go right over. Bill, once again, thank you very much for being on the Spotlight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.